So I would say the most common one is that they want to be touched. A lot of them, they haven't been touched in a while. So it's interesting when I playfully touch them and flirt with them, I wouldn't say they go wild, but you can see it does a lot to them.
Most men, their top love language is physical touch, and most men are walking around actually feeling starved
Hmm.
for physical touch, like starving, like love deprived and starving because they so want playful, like all types of physical touch. Welcome to Create Love with Carrie Margaret. I'm here to help you find and create the story of you, your authenticity, your love, your life. We live in a shifting culture where men and women don't know how to act, to find authentic self-expression, connection, and love. Let's remove the fear around expressing femininity and masculinity and come to a greater understanding of each other and build connection based on authenticity and attraction and being a team instead of adversaries. There's room for every type of life story and love story. You get to be the hero of your own story. Let me walk with you to create understanding, face fears, deconstruct attraction and passion, heal old wounds and grief, and show up as the person, lover, partner, and friend that you are here to be. Hi there, this is Carrie Margaret, and we have something really exciting for you today. Today, I'm here with Danielle Nonog, who has an amazing story and amazing tidbits about how to create your great, passionate love story. So, Danielle is a dating coach in San Diego, and you come from a really interesting background. I remember the first time that I saw you at a gathering, I just looked over and I was like, oh, wow, that woman is so sexy. And I had to know,
Thank
of course,
Carrie.
I had to know what some of your secrets were and why I was just so drawn to you. Like there was a gravity to you. So, why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself and one of the ways that you've like cultivated that level of sensuality and sexuality and attraction factor?
Well, thanks for having me here, Carrie. We're both dating and relationship coaches, and we have completely different background stories. And it's interesting that she brought up the sensuality because I come from a background of working in the adult entertainment industry. I was an exotic dancer for about 5 years. And before I got into that, I used to be this very insecure tomboy who just needed money. And originally, going in the industry, I needed money. I also found I found a way to tap into my femininity and learn sensuality and learn how to be flirtatious and confident. Because if I'm not embodying any of those things, I wouldn't have made money. So that's a little bit of how I came to be who I am today.
Yeah, I find this part of your story so interesting. And it's when you started to tell me, I'd had sort of the like still layers of we're always working through all different layers of things and layers of uncomfortability, probably, from different stories or, that heard about stripping in the sex industry. And it made me nervous. And I was like, you know what? Danielle is an amazing woman. I was just like, I just want to run towards you and learn more about it. And I like have learned so much from you about how to build up that sexy confidence and sensuality. So are there any things that you want to share about that, like off the bat before, like finding your own spark? Because we're going to kind of get into talking about how to create spark and aliveness in relationships.
There's so much we can delve into when it comes to Spark because I'm constantly exploring that, even today. But it was very easy to explore that while I was working in the sex industry because that was part of my job. I had to create that spark for all kinds of people, all walks of life that came in there. You'd be surprised who come in there. You'd think they wouldn't come in there, but they do. But yeah, I've had a lot of single men that came in there. There were married men, and I know some of you hearing this would be a little triggered by that, and I understand why. Yeah, I've approached it differently where I would build relationships with these men who would revisit me, and they eventually became comfortable enough to share about their relationship life. And I would playfully recommend a suggestion, some advice on how to seduce their wives. And as they continue to revisit me, they say, wow, that worked. A lot of these times I've noticed men will be comfortable enough to be vulnerable and share with me. And sometimes I just have to ask them, do you ever express that out loud to your wife? And they said, no. I'm like, well, try that next time. Sometimes they need to go back to the basics of practicing gratitude. But anyway, I've observed other dancers seducing men and I picked up on it. I've also went as a customer myself because I'm also into women as well. I would go to strip clubs as a customer and I would cherry pick what I liked each girl did. It's really fascinating. One example is that eye gazing or eye contact goes a long way. I notice I'll be prepared with my stack of money. I'll throw money to like every girl that dances because I love empowering them. But I really pay close attention to the ones that are confident enough to look into your eyes. So yeah, there's so many things we can dive into. What do you think we can dive into?
Oh, yeah. So I'd love to dive into like a few more of those types of tips, like the eye gazing, women that look into your eyes. I remember you had said one to me that I started to try right away, which is just a simple thing of like moving your hair over to the side and
Yes, well, we did
exposing
that.
exposing your neck and just as you're sitting and talking to somebody. And this is something that whether or not this is a new person that you're interested in and maybe you just want to send the sign, or somebody that you've like been more engaged in and dating in a relationship. And this was another one that you told me about, just kind of leaning back and exposing your legs a little bit. I mean, some of these
Mhm.
really subtle things.
Body language.
Yeah.
Body language goes a long way. And also talking a little slower. Of course, there's rapport, but there's a lot you can do when you choose to be slow paced with your voice. Men love seductive tones of voice. They get entranced. Sometimes they don't know what to do with themselves. But yeah, I love that you brought up the whole like hair and then exposing the neck. They really like that area. And then crossing your legs. Body language, you facing them facing you.
Mhm.
Yeah, they'll feel stunned by that.
Mhm.
And it's also important to be aware of how into they are to you. And there's ways to see that. For example, because I've been working in that industry for a while, the key things I notice in men when they get nervous because they're like ridiculously attracted to you, but they won't express it out loud, is their hands in their pockets because they're trying to make themselves seem bigger than they are.
Mhm.
And leaning towards you is an obvious one. They want to get close to you. They want to know you. And oh, there's this thing they do with their arms. They don't know what to do with it. They're they're like their nerves are reacting. You'll see them doing this while they're looking at you. So that's where like you're really seducing them.
How important is it to make a man nervous when you're seducing him?
Oh, that's a good question.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say it's important to make them nervous. It's just important to see if they're really feeling you. Because
Mm,
there are also body language, no matter how gorgeous you are, sometimes you're not their type. And it's important to get that cue. Yeah. So that I think that's the only why I say it's important to be aware of that. Because you'd rather use your time on someone who's into you.
mhm.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we chatted about a little bit before we started the interview today is we're talking about commonalities in what men were looking for, whether they're single or in a relationship. There's a lot of men, even in all different areas. I've kind of been in the rabbit hole of relationship stuff between men and women in particular, and also same sex, but for a bit. And there are a lot of people in the field. Allison Armstrong is one that just says that like men are going to use a certain amount of porn for looking for a natural sense of like variety. Not all men, but just a large segment. So there is, the point of variety, but really, what did you find that men were looking for when they were going to the strip clubs?
They're looking for initially, they look for excitement.
Mm.
They look for excitement, but it's also that energy you bring. If you bring that kind of energy where they feel seen, even though you're not doing much, there's just a presence that you bring, then naturally they'll open up more and they find that connection valuable. Even though they don't originally look for that, they do value that. One of the sayings I like to say is oftentimes we're given or we're going after something from the illusion of what we want, but we end up for what we actually need. So that's been my interaction with a lot of men that come to the club and interact with me. Like they just look for, the surface level excitement, but because I give that effort to be present with them, I hear what they actually need.
Mm. Okay, so you're experiencing needs that aren't being met in other
Hmm.
places.
Yep.
And, the whole purpose of this and the interviews that I do is to really help people figure out how to create an amazing love story. And one of the things that I find that's so exciting about getting into interviews related to anything in sex work, and right now we're talking about stripping, is that, like you mentioned before, like if you're going to get paid for this, you've got to be good at what you do and then be able to uncover what people are looking for.
Yep.
And so, what are you finding that people are going in looking for in terms of needs that are being met? Because a lot of times people are going in and they're looking for needs that are not being met, this way rather than looking in the relationship. And women do this as well. And
Hmm.
women go to strip clubs as well.
Yeah, totally.
This tends to be a little bit more oriented towards heterosexual relationships. Danielle has a beautiful love story with another woman, so she's in a same sex relationship, and it is applicable to all, but it will tend to go a little bit towards men and women. But back
Totally.
to the question, what were the needs that you were noticing that people weren't having met?
So I would say the most common one is that they want to be touched. A lot of them, they haven't been touched in a while. So it's interesting when I playfully touch them and flirt with them, I wouldn't say they go wild, but you can see it does a lot to them.
Mhm.
And it's interesting to see how much money is spent for that simple thing alone.
Mhm.
It's intimacy. It's some kind of intimacy, but I notice they spend even more when you develop that connection with them that they've been looking for.
Mhm.
It's as if they haven't been heard or seen in a long time, but that's because they do that to themselves.
Mhm.
Men typically they don't know how to. They're not raised to express their feelings socially, so yeah.
So you would find that it would like enter in with playful touch.
Yep.
And then it would really be about being seen and being
Yep.
understood and heard. And it's really interesting. There's another woman who I might, bring on to interview at some point, who gave me the tip that like most men, their top love language is physical touch. And most men are walking around actually feeling starved
Hmm.
for physical touch, like starving, like love deprived and starving because they so want like all types of physical touch
Yep.
and playful physical touch. So And I see that as a really loving thing that you can bring into a relationship, like how to just make it more fun and playful,
Mhm.
to in terms of teasing playful touch. So, any tips that you can give to our listeners about playful touch?
Playful touch, it's interesting because when you mention all of that, I just had a flashback of this woman I went out on a date with years ago, and she did something that attracted me. And she was not only was she beautiful, it's her confidence and how funny she is. But I remember she had the playful touchdown. Like she would crack a lot of jokes. She knew I was gonna laugh. She was able to sense what my humor was. And every time she knew I was about to laugh, she was like, "Oh, you know." I was like, "Oh my goodness." Oh, you can't see from the camera, but I touched Carrie's leg over there. But just things like that, like as if you're trying to hold yourself. But she knew she was trying to turn me on at that point.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
that's the first thing that came to my mind. But yeah, I naturally do that with the guys that I talk to in the club.
Mm.
I just touch their car and sometimes compliment and I'm like, wow, you work out.
Mm.
Yeah, just having fun together.
Mm. Yeah. And, any other thing that remember from that time working in the strip clubs that any other needs or things that you would notice that like talk amongst the other women that were working that men were like continually looking for as they went in, or women as well as they went into the strip clubs? I'm just curious if there's anything else that you noticed because you talked about playful physical touch and then that
Hmm.
need to be seen, heard, and understood. And is there anything else that comes to mind?
Hmm. I'm trying to think about your question. If there's anything else aside from physical touch and playfulness.
Yeah.
Um, well, the playfulness is a key thing to start with because for me personally, what has always worked with me when I'm making a lot of money in the strip club is I have a way of going deep with men. But trying to go deep right away, it can be like scary. So I always start it with playfulness. So one key thing that I just thought of right now as you're asking me that question is I remember this guy, he came into the club super plaster drunk. And I remember he was paying for everybody's dances. He was super generous. But while on the surface level, everyone will see, oh, he's this fun guy, he's generous, he just wants to turn up and party. I see him like, okay, he's overstimulating himself because he's really sad about something. So eventually when he got a dance with me, I asked him how he really was, after the whole playfulness, then um laughter and flirtatiousness. I then took a moment and looked into his eyes and just went deep. I said, "So, how are you really feeling?" And yeah, he got very vulnerable. And I noticed every time I do that, it gets them to want to keep coming back.
Mm. Wow. Vulnerability. That is not what I was expecting to hear.
Well, like I said, you don't want to go right
Yeah.
away in that way. You
Mm.
want to start with playfulness.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, I love the switch between the 2, the
Hmm.
playfulness and the vulnerability.
Yeah.
And I tend to, like, lead with vulnerability. My thing is, like, I'll talk about something vulnerable for me
Hmm.
rather than asking a person that I'm dating exactly what's going on with them. I'll, like, say, "Okay, this experience." I won't say I felt vulnerable, but, like, "Oh, I just experienced this experience and I felt this."
Hmm.
And or this is how I move through this thing, expressing vulnerability that way, whether it's like a time that I was feeling sad or, I remember talking about time that I just like I felt, really down for a day or two. And I was just like, oh, and I just kind of held space for myself, loving space for myself and allowed myself to move through it. And that was so I will lead with vulnerable shares that way, where
Mm.
I am leading with like opening up the space by making it safe for them. So I'm really curious in that context, how that kind of, play with vulnerability happens for you. Like, you just ask him, like, you're I'm trying to paint a picture for myself and for
Yeah.
other people, like, how to move between this playful sensuality and allowing for the vulnerability
Okay,
and
so
asking.
I'm remembering back at that time before I asked him that deep question. Like
Mhm.
we were already in that he's already blissed out from how playful and flirtatious I am and how I'm now realizing I need to bring up like you have to have a great sense of humor too. Because like
Ah,
some dark things will happen and I guess I have a natural way of making something dark go light, like
mm,
turn it light. So that will come up a lot. But before I asked that deep question, he was already blissed out. Like I was kind of just like playfully massaging his shoulders. And, he was already like gazing into me. And that's when I went deep.
mm,
So it's like they're in a comfortable state. I remember someone I talked to, they were saying, "Oh, you put them in the pillow talk state." I'm like, interesting. I can see that.
mhm,
Because when you're pillow talking with someone, you just want to like open up about everything.
mhm.
And that's what we were in.
Yeah. Playfulness, flirtation, humor, vulnerability. Well,
Hmm.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's beautiful. And, yeah, to really bring back that spark and excitement. And before we kind of segue out of this, I'm curious, you told me that a lot of the men would like ask you like how to shift things with their wives or girlfriends, and you
Hmm.
would give them tips. So I'm just curious some of the tips that you would give them so that they could create that space for their
Totally.
wives and
It's
girlfriends.
interesting because when I'd have conversations with them during a lap dance, I've noticed when I'm giving them a lap dance, I don't have to dance the whole time, as most girls would think. I can just sit on their lap and literally talk to them. But usually I notice when they're in the lap dance, that's when they're pretty vulnerable.
Mm,
Because when they're on the dance floor or where they're on like the regular floor where all the customers are, they feel like they have to put this facade and this mask on to seem like they're super macho.
mm.
But my favorite thing to do is when they're vulnerable. So there's a point where I build relationships with them and they get comfortable enough to open up about their romantic life. And instead of me judging them, because they should be, I could be pointing fingers at them and be like, you should be with your wife right now, or you should be with your girlfriend. Instead, I give suggestions like, hey, why don't you talk to your wife this way? And what you just shared with me, what you actually appreciate about her, how about sharing that? They're like, okay. And the things that are missing, I encourage them to bring that up. They're like, that's scary. I don't know how to do that. I don't have the heart to do that. I said, no, you can be playful about it. So I'll actually touch them a certain way and say, you can touch your wife like this. And it's like I'm teaching them to be playful as well
Mhm,
and intimate with their wife. It's
mhm.
interesting. And I even share with them how, practice the eye gazing. And when you guys are out in public, speak sweet things to her in her ear.
Oh my
That'll light her
gosh.
up.
Yeah, isn't
Yeah.
that amazing?
Hmm.
It is amazing, yeah.
Yeah. Are you getting goosebumps like thinking about
I'm
that?
getting
Yeah.
goosebumps thinking about
I
it.
know that turns me on.
Yeah,
When your lover speaks sweet things in public into your ear and you're like,
yeah,
whoa, I didn't expect that. That gets me
yeah,
excited,
yeah.
to go home with you.
Yeah, that's so true. I mean, there is a real difference in the way that the man shows up in terms of our own excitement,
Yeah.
having a really good dance partner that does the things
Yes.
makes it a lot more magical, right?
Hmm.
Now, talking about being good dance partners, now, so you're a dating coach in San Diego
Hmm.
and you work with conscious men and
Conscious
women,
singles. Yep.
conscious
Because I'm
singles.
also a matchmaker.
Yeah. So I want to get into that a little bit before before we tie up and let people know a little bit more about how they can find out more about you and to create magic in their dating life. What for you is, a great passionate love story?
Oh, for me, without overthinking, a great, passionate love story is when you can really connect with someone to where there's this unwavering devotion. Like I'm thinking about
Mm.
Kyla, the woman I'm with right now, and it's amazing because part of my background story, yes, I lived that lifestyle. I also did polyamory for a while. So even when I dated other women, it was open relationship. Like almost every person I was with in the past was open relationship. But in my present relationship, we have this passion and connection that's so deep that I made no hesitation to drop that and be monogamous with her. And not to say that polyamory is bad. It's um more power to you if it works. I know it takes a lot of attentiveness. It takes a lot of work. It's not something that like, oh, there's like easy rules. No, there's a lot to it in polyamory, but it's beautiful. I found a different kind of liberation. I would say that's my love story. I thought I was free dating multiple people. I thought I had way more options that way, but I felt a different kind of liberation being with one person, where one person that fully accepts me for who I am and inspires me in a big way. Like having that one person you can come home to and know that fully understands rather than just getting 30% or 40% from each of these other people. Because for me, that was exhausting. I felt much more freedom finding that person that fully gets.
Mm. I love this point so much. We were actually talking about this right before we started interviewing because uh, people have different styles of dating. I mean, we've touched on like some controversial things like polyamory, porn use,
Yeah.
sex industry. So this is all, I mean, these are all things that were personally very triggering for me before. I tend to when I see something that is uncomfortable, I want to run towards it and see what I can learn from it,
Mhm.
especially from a relationship perspective, because we can learn so much from different more fringe ideas or, in the sex industry from, people are getting paid to be effectively seductive.
Yeah.
And polyamory, people like developing the communication skills and the spice to keep multiple relationships
Oh my
going on.
gosh. Yeah.
Like there's so much gold to be learned in these places in being open-minded and exploring them, which is one of the reasons that I love to share them with you. And one of the things that we were talking about was this thing of just even taking consideration people's mating preferences and where they are lifestyle wise. Like if somebody is really devoted to you, they're going to show their devotion
Yep.
and they're going to want to meet, the needs that you have.
Mm.
And you can tell you're really devoted to somebody when, you're wanting to completely meet their needs and looking for them and anticipating and all of that. I mean, that is a real show of I think that's a real show of devotion and a level of commitment, whether or not people are talking about, commitment. Like when people are committed to each other, they show it in action.
Yes.
And what I loved about this is that I think there's a lot of things going on in dating in particular in the United States. Maybe particularly so in California more than other places, but the United States in general with apps and casual kind of dating where women might feel like, well, I just kind of have to play these game roles. And actually, like the rules of the game of maybe, doing things in terms of, there's a lot of talk about levels of being involved with people without really kind of the container or the commitment that the person wants for their safety. And in both speaking to men and women, I've spoken to so many conscious men. They're like, if women were really honest, like 80% of them don't want this type of situation. They want a different
Mhm.
situation. And he said, actually, if women changed their standards and they all started asking for exactly what they wanted, it would change
Yep.
It would change the feel completely. Nobody else would have to go about like doing things that they don't necessarily want. There would always be the space for the people who want to engage in whatever. So and everybody go out and date and create your own love story the way you want to. But what I
Yes.
love about this, and this is a really important thing, and the thing that I love about your love story is that like if somebody is really devoted to you, they're going to show you that devotion.
There's no question about it. There's no mixed signals. They just do it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that is a beautiful golden nugget. I know so many women I've been on, through the dating coaching, through relationship coaching with girlfriends that are, maybe with somebody like spending time with somebody they really care about and, you know, wanting the person to sort of step up and feel, the same way or getting kind of caught up in that. And what's so liberating about it is that like, uh, it's liberating to be able to let that go
Hmm.
and let the people step up that want to. And yeah, somebody who's very devoted always will. So lots of triggering things potentially in this conversation.
Yeah.
Like all of a sudden, all these people are going to stop doing their casual situationships, or take a big long look in the mirror about them and contemplate on what they can learn from the sex industry and polyamory. And yeah, so I hope that you took a lot of golden nuggets, that you're able to see within sort of the more of the controversy and all of these things, this level of like, what can I learn from this? Like,
Mhm.
how can I create my own empowering love story by, taking tips from the spaces at work? I mean, I love that you brought up playfulness, flirting, like vulnerability in like in playful touch, all of this. And it really, it's funny. I didn't know that's what the answer was going to be. And it's a lot of what works in general.
Right. Yeah.
So it's so great to have that reinforcement. Yeah, this is what people will pay for.
Yeah.
So yeah. And so if people want to create a new playful dating experience, love experience, call in that love that they've been looking for. How do they find out about you? What's the best way for people to get your information?
The best way for you guys to find me is go on Instagram and type my first name and last name, Danielle Nonog, DanielleNonog. It's all one word. And you find me on there, and I'll be posting my singles events. I hope you join if you're in San Diego. And yeah, have fun dating, guys.
Yeah, have fun dating. Have fun dating. Have fun in your love relationship. Have fun with it. Danielle, I've got like a sister love story going on with you. I adore you so much. I just appreciate so much the playfulness. And I just want to acknowledge you for your playfulness and your sensuality and your ability to hold space. She was actually holding space for me early, like playful, like holding deep space, allowing me to be vulnerable, and then getting into the play. I just want to acknowledge you, how much I appreciate you. So thanks so much for being
Oh,
here
I love you
today.
too, Carrie.
Mhm.
Oh.
All right, guys, enjoy. Sending you lots of love.